afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeremy Warnick. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Cambridge Police Department. Just wanted to introduce our officers that are standing here from our command staff. Commissioner Bard is going to provide an overview of the events that occurred on Friday evening, and then open it up to you for brief questions. But standing here, in addition to Commissioner Bard, is Deputy Superintendent Rob Lowe, Deputy Superintendent Jack Albert, Deputy Superintendent Leonard DePietro, and Superintendent Stephen DeMarco. With that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Bard for an overview and questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. So just as a matter of a brief recap, on Friday evening at approximately 9:09 p.m., our officers responded to the intersection of Massachusetts Avenue and Waterhouse for disturbance. Emergency communications stated that they received a call from a woman who stated that a naked male had thrown his clothes into her face. Approximately 6 other calls were received for a male who was reportedly completely naked. Officers responded, located the male, and verbally engaged him on the intersection on the median there at Massachusetts Avenue. At some point, it was learned from his acquaintances that he may have ingested a hallucinogenic substance. Numerous attempts were made by the officers to calm down the male, but they were met with opposition and hostility. It escalated, and while officers were attempting to speak with him. After he was observed clenching his fist and moving towards officers, the decision was made to take the individual down. His legs were grabbed, he was taken to the ground. Once on the ground, the male continued to resist arrest. 3 officers from the Cambridge Police Department and another officer from the Transit Police Department were required to gain compliance from the male and place him in the handcuffs to avoid further injury to himself, responding officers, or others in the area. The male was subsequently transported to the local hospital for evaluation. While under transport, he proceeded to spit a mixture of blood and saliva into the face of a paramedic or EMT. As a result of the incident, the individual is subject to being charged with indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, assault, resisting arrest, and assault and battery on the ambulance personnel. During the incident, 2 CPD officers were also treated at a local hospital for minor injuries and unprotected exposure to bodily fluids. Because the use of force was required in order to gain compliance from the individual and to avoid further injury to himself, the responding onlookers and the officers, an internal review is being conducted by the department's leadership, professional standards unit, and per departmental policy. At this time, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
Commissioner, can you tell us whether or not you believe how your officers behaved was appropriate?
I can tell you that the goal in these situations is always to use the least amount of force and get the subject to mental health providers, using the least amount of force. But the grand aim is always to use the least amount of force necessary. Ideally, in an optimal situation, that's no force. You're able to talk to the individual, gain compliance, and then get them to the mental health treatment that they need.
Can you talk to us about the tactics of punching somebody?
Can you
One at a time.
talk to us about there are reports that your officers hit this man as he was on the ground 5 times. Is that true?
I can tell you that always in these instances, the officers are trained to use the least amount of force necessary. The officers receive many hours in training and crisis intervention training and mental health training, and they're also taught the force continuum. The force continuum begins with just the mere presence of the officers. It escalates to verbal commands being given by the officers, from there to control holds, to other less than lethal force being used, and that can consist of anything from punches, kicks, use of baton, or pepper spray. So,
Commissioner, it seemed pretty clear looking at the video that striking the man while he was on the ground 5 times looked very violent. Can you contextualize that in any way between what was required and what was not required? What was the most reasonable thing that officers, the least amount of force officers could have used? In the incident report, Officer Burke states that punching 5 times was not effective, but he did it anyway, presumably because he hoped it would be. But what are realistic options? Because it looked very violent.
like I said, ideally, the object is to engage verbally only. But that's only the most
Right.
ideal.
He's struggling on the ground, he's pinned down by 3
Let me
officers.
finish answering
They
your
start to
question.
punch.
Let me finish your question. So, let me finish answering your question. So ideally, least amount of force possible, that's the grand aim that we have. As the situation escalates, which is largely out of our control and mostly controlled by the individual's actions, this time it escalated to the point where the officers made a tactical decision to take the individual to the ground. I gotta stress, it was for his safety, the safety of the officers, and the safety of everybody else around. As the officers move up that force continuum, I think, that video shows the officers standing around engaging them verbally for a long period of time. At some point, the officers realized that made the determination that was less than successful and decided to take him to the ground. That video also shows that the male wasn't compliant while he was on the ground. There's a lot of stuff going on down there. He was flailing, kicking, and the officers were doing everything within their power as they go up that force continuum to bring him into custody and compliance and control safely so that they can get him the mental health attention that he needed.
Commissioner,
So when punches didn't work, what did they do?
They continued to try to use other means, control holds to get his arms from underneath his body, because the male was constricted, his arm underneath his body, so that it wasn't allowing the officers the opportunity to handcuff him. So they continued other measures, other control holds, other uses of their baton to try to get the arm leverage from underneath the man's body and then to cuff him. It's a very difficult thing to do. If anyone's ever had to constrain an individual against their will, they'll know that it's a very difficult thing to do. I just want to stress here also that it's important to not gauge the officer's actions within the construct of some ideal construct, and to actually gauge their actions within the context of a rapidly evolving situation. To do so, like with 20/20 hindsight, is unfair. So you gotta look at, I think the best test is to look at what actually happened, and then to decide whether what happened wasn't reasonable.
How long before the officers verbally engaged this man until they decided to take him down? What was the time?
So how long? I haven't conducted a frame by frame review, so I don't have the answer to that question, but it was minutes while the officers were talking to him.
And you said they used the baton to put his hand behind his back. So they hit him, you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that the officers hit him with a baton. I'm saying that the arrest report shows that an officer used the baton to try to leverage the arm to get it from underneath to behind his back. But I also want to stress that, it's the early stages of the investigation, and that a complete and thorough review is being conducted by professional standards.
Do you stand by your officers? Do you stand by those officers today?
Could you elaborate on your question?
Do you support them today?
I absolutely do support the officers. I mean, like I said, you have to judge their actions within the context of a rapidly evolving situation, and not with this ideal construct.
Are they still on duty?
Ideally, the officers would, they attempted to verbally engage, and ideally, it would end there. He comes along with us, and it ends there. But we don't exist, and we don't operate in an ideal world. We operate in a practical world. So the officers took the actions that they felt necessary at that time. But once again, I'm making no determinations as to prior to completing a complete and thorough investigation.
And the mayor called it disturbing, a city councilor agreed. Do you agree with that characterization?
The mayor and the city councilor are entitled to make an opinion and make a determination.
Do you believe their action was appropriate though, given what you have seen so far?
Once again, I don't want to say anything prior to that could be construed as influence in this ongoing investigation. So I'll just stress and reiterate that a complete and thorough investigation is underway.
Why was CPD called? Of the officers that were involved, are they still on duty? And then talk to us about the investigation, internal investigation, how all of that worked.
Okay, so the officers have not been placed on administrative leave. One of the officers, I believe, is still out because of injuries they suffered during the altercation, during the incident. What was the second part of the question?
Walk us through how the internal investigation works.
So really, all I can say is that our professional standards is conducting it, and as to how long it'll take, as long as necessary to conduct a complete and thorough investigation.
And will all that information,
Officers involved?
will all that information be made public with the findings of the investigation?
Absolutely, you know, we strive to be transparent, you know, I'm here today talking to you, as soon as we get information, we've been releasing it through our public information office, and as soon as the investigation is complete, we'll also release that through our public administrator.
Why was CPD called in the first place? It seems like the Harvard University Health Services was called originally, and they transferred the call to CPD. Is that the normal protocol, or how did that exactly transpire?
All I'll say is that we received the information from emergency communications that there was a naked male on Massachusetts Avenue at Waterhouse, and we responded.
Did you not speak to HUHS?
I don't believe we did at that time.
Commissioner,
Could you talk a bit about the individual who was arrested? If you would help me pronounce his name, that would be very helpful, by the way. But his current state, I understand he's in custody. How is he doing right now?
Well, we'll provide his name. I've been actually going through a process of referring to him as the individual. You know, for me, it's just like a harm reduction strategy. I know at some point that male will be out in the workforce looking to, you know, gain employment, and to the extent that there's not a video of me referencing him being naked out there on Massachusetts Avenue, I think that helps to that situation.
Okay.
So you can get with the public information office after this, and they can help you with clarifying how to pronounce his name.
And how's he doing?
Commissioner.
Can you talk about his condition at all? Is he okay? Is he hurt?
I'll tell you that, in respect to his privacy, I'll tell you that he was taken to the hospital to be treated for minor injuries, but was held for observation due to ingesting a hallucinogenic substance, not because of any injury sustained.
He said he spit blood at the EMT workers. Was that because of the injury he sustained when he was being arrested, or where did that blood come from?
Well, it's important to note that the male had ingested a hallucinogenic substance. While it can be inferred that any injury to the mouth occurred during the struggle with police, the male could have suffered from injuries prior to us getting. We don't really know. And once again, the investigation is ongoing.
Commissioner, can you clarify how many officers were involved in this one incident? And also, could you also talk about what this incident is doing to the city's relationship with communities of color here in Cambridge? You've come under criticism from students at Harvard Law School and in the larger community. Can you talk about that relationship there?
Okay, so that was multi.
Like
Give me the first
question. How many officers?
In total, I'm not, as I stand here, I'm not certain. That actually engaged physically with the male, I believe 3 Cambridge police officers and 1 transit officer. But how many officers were in total on the scene trying to direct traffic, trying to mitigate
Just doing the
circumstances?
guys.
So it should be 3 CPG, 1 transit.
Okay. And then criticisms that with the black community here in Cambridge.
So, I mean, this agency has gone through great lengths to make sure that we do everything, you know, through a lens of procedural justice, to try to make sure that everything we do is fair, transparent, that we provide the community with a voice, and that we are impartial. So, to the extent that we make sure that all of the training that we provide our officers with manifest itself in, you know, everyday actions. It's, you know, it's the grand aim that we have in view. It's our desire to make sure that the training translates to how we actually interact with folks daily. But the department has made great strides to build trust and maintain trust with members of all our communities.
In
You
that
want to
vein,
highlight
do you
the
feel like this
specific
is?
interactions you've had, some of the events over the weekend?
Okay. So, over the weekend, on Saturday, I had a coffee with Commissioner event pre-planned, and some concerned minority Harvard students showed up, and we had frank and honest discussions. Yesterday, I actually had pre-planned a church event with the majority of them were Harvard students, and they actually were concerned. We had candid conversations behind the issues of race and policing. Today, I'm here talking to you about these same things, about this specific incident. But the idea is, you know, to be transparent when things do happen. That's the only way you're going to build, you know, trust.
Do you feel like your department is coming under the microscope unfairly as a result of this?
You know what? I believe that as police, everything we do, we should be accountable to society. So I don't think it's possible to be unfairly under any microscope when it comes to us being accountable to the community that we serve. So,
I guess I was speaking more in the lines of, you know, you have elected officials who are not police officers second guessing how you do your jobs right now, and do you think that criticism is unfair?
once again, I can't speak on both sides of my mouth. When I say that I think that we're accountable to society in all aspects, that's what I mean. So that an elected official would form an opinion, that's their right, and we will continue to be transparent and accountable to society.
One or two more questions.
You are very new to this job, less than a year. I mean, how are you dealing with this?
I think, incidents shouldn't change the way you police and the way you interact with folks. I think that I'm one of those folks that believe in being out there with the community. I think that in order for me to build any trust and legitimacy, you gotta trust that I'm gonna come here and tell you when I think my officers did wrong, and I'm gonna come here and tell you when I think they did right, and be consistent across those lines. And that's how I, tried to steer myself every day. And the officers gotta understand that same thing. They gotta know that if I think that they didn't do any wrong, I don't have a problem saying it. Cause they know if I think they did wrong, then I'm gonna be out here saying that, that they did it.
So in this
Commissioner
case,
Barton,
they
one of
do
the
it right or
reasons
wrong?
that was given for the action to the punching was that it was a dangerous scene with traffic going past. There's also been reports that officers were using their time blocking people from filming. Who is directing the actions of the officers around the perimeter?
So the allegation that officers were stopping individuals from filming, I haven't seen any evidence of that. And if some exists, I would like to have it because it would be a clear violation of policy. I mean, it's a well-recognized principle that members of the public can perform police, perform in public actions. So if it did happen, it would be a clear violation of policy. I haven't seen any evidence of it.
You say you're not sure how many officers were around the scene. Do you know who's directing them, and do you know if they were asked to block traffic to make the scene less dangerous?
I don't think that you have to be asked to block traffic. I think that it's one of those instinctive things that officers know to do to protect, the entire scene.
But we know traffic was going past. We saw the bus going past.
So now your question just got lost on me. Repeat your question.
I'm sorry. I feel like if it was obvious to block traffic, traffic didn't seem to be blocked. We saw traffic going past. We saw a bus going past.
So remember, this is within the context of a rapidly evolving situation. The first thing that happens is officers show up and engage this obviously erratic male who's naked on the median. As more officers come and you can exert more control over a situation and protect more individuals, then you cordon off the area so that you can make sure that no one gets hurt or is subject to harm. So it's in the stages of officers coming to the scene. So
where is the student now? Is he still in the hospital or is he in police custody?
the student is still being evaluated.
At the hospital?
Still being evaluated.
Okay, so you don't have any information about his arraignment?
The arraignment hasn't been scheduled yet.
And to be clear, he's a Harvard Law student, exactly.
I'm not certain of his status at Harvard. I believe he is a Harvard student, but I'm not certain of his exact status or program.
One final question.
Has anyone from Harvard contacted you from either the legal team or from the administration?
We've been in contact with administrators at Harvard University. Most recently, and I may butcher his title, but it's the Dean of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion. We've been in touch with that individual.
This is a mental health case, right? Why is he being charged?
So that's an excellent question, and that's one of the reasons why the individual hasn't been arraigned yet. This department has gone through great strides to ensure that it's a socially just agency. And when I say socially just, I mean that we recognize that there are individuals, probably a great percentage of individuals, who are better served by means other than the criminal justice system. So the individuals currently being evaluated to see if they fit that set of circumstances.
So all those charges could be dropped and dealt with some other way?
I'll just reiterate the same answer.
Is that your department's call or is it the DA's call?
We're working collaboratively with a bunch of individuals, a bunch of different entities.
I'll stick around for any additional one-on-one questions. In the meantime, thank you for your time.